Hello and welcome to the University of Galway's Health and Safety for Line Managers and Supervisors. In this session, we'll explain your legal responsibilities. We'll see how these fit into the university's safety management system. We'll describe what you have to do to meet those legal responsibilities, and we'll give some manager and supervisor specific examples and where you can then go and get help and information if needed. Before we start into the session, I'd like to bring to your attention some of the positive aspects of safety management. Good safety management brings people together. It provides opportunities to work together. In an increasingly fractured work environment, good health and safety management is a positive. Other positive outcomes of good health and safety management are that it increases feelings of well-being and connectedness for yourself and for your colleagues and improves perceptions of professionalism. Good health and safety management also aligns well with the university's strategy around being a respectful university. And to quote from that strategy, everybody working in the University of Galway campuses can expect to be enabled to do their best work in a positive and safe work environment, which is mindful of employees' physical, intellectual and well-being needs. And the icing on the cake for good managers is well captured by Bill George of the Harvard Business School and also CEO or ex-CEO of Medtronic. And he says that for authentic leaders, there are special rewards. No individual achievement can equal the pleasure of leading a group of people to achieve a worthy goal. And good health and safety management is definitely a worthy goal. So let's move on now to the specific legal duties and responsibilities that you hold as manager. So let's take an overview look at legal duties and responsibilities. So firstly, the University of Galway's safety management system operates on a devolved management structure. This allows the university to comply with the Safety, Health and Welfare at Work Act. This approach is common to all workplaces. It's the way our legislation is set up. So in the context of the university, health and safety management follows the main management levels in the university. So you have your senior managers with directors and heads of unit, then line managers, principal investigators, senior administrators, section leaders, chief technical officers, and then we have supervisory staff, staff supervising frontline services or staff supervising staff in higher risk work. So what does this look like under the Safety, Health and Welfare at Work Act? So under the Act and the University of Galway Safety Statement, the university president and the governing body have ultimate responsibility for safety. But then heads of unit are in turn responsible for health and safety within their unit, and managers and supervisors in their turn are responsible for ensuring the health and safety of those they manage or supervise. So where does the Health and Safety Office sit in this hierarchy? Well, the Health and Safety Office holds an advisory and supporting role, and this is required by the Act. The Act requires the university to have a competent person. So the Health and Safety Officer acts as the competent person, but does not and cannot hold responsibility for operational health and safety. The Health and Safety Office staff can advise you and help you to fulfill your responsibilities. So let's move on now and look at the requirements of the Safety, Health and Welfare at Work Act and the other regulations associated with it. So the Act is the main law setting out what an employer must do to ensure that employees and others are safe in the workplace. So you may ask yourself, well, why do managers and supervisors have responsibilities under the Act? Well, in the Act, the definition of an employer includes not only the person who has a contract of employment with an employee, but also a person under whose control and direction an employee works. So hence, managers and supervisors. So what does this mean for you? What do you need to do and how do you do it? One of your key duties is that you identify the hazards your staff are likely to encounter, you assess the risk, and you put controls in place to eliminate or minimize the risk. So number one, risk assessment. You'll see this requirement cropping up in all of the regulations as well as the Safety, Health and Welfare at Work Act. So in practical terms, this means getting a handle on the activities that your staff carry out. So list the activities and see, are there any hazards associated with those activities? Some of the activities that you may need to consider are, do they use a PC? Do your staff lift or move heavy items? Do they drive for work? Are they using chemicals? Do they use any equipment that could be considered to be hazardous? Do they use a ladder? Do they use portable electrical appliances? Do they travel abroad for work? Another aspect of your activities that you may need to assess are the events or conferences or seminars where members of the public attend. Seminars or conferences that only involve your staff do not need special consideration. You are required to identify the hazards for each activity and the location. You're expected to assess the risks and set out how the controls you have in place or required to have in place minimize that risk. So identify the hazards, assess the risk, and set out the controls in place to minimize or eliminate the risk. Assessing the risk simply means deciding how likely it is that your staff could be injured or suffer ill health, and how bad could that injury be. There is a session available on how to carry out risk assessments. The law says you must put the assessment in writing, and you have to set out your plan for reducing the risk. You are also required to consult with staff when deciding the controls, and you've got to let them know the outcome of any assessments. Part 3 of the University Safety Statement explains the risk assessment process in more detail, and the Health and Safety Office website has blank risk assessment forms for you to use. Once you've your risk assessments completed, you need to let your head of unit know, and you need to put those risk assessments up on your unit's SharePoint site. You do have to review the risk assessments annually just to make sure that they're still relevant and that the controls are actually working, that they are reducing the risks. The next major element of your duties and responsibilities is safety training. So based on the risk assessment and the required roles within your area, for instance, fire marshals, you will then decide what staff need safety training. And you need to arrange the training either through the Health and Safety Office or within your own unit. The law clearly states that you have to ensure your staff have enough information and training to carry out their work safely. It also states that records have to be kept. And it's important to realise that failure to provide training is considered a serious offence under the Safety, Health and Welfare at Work Act and can lead to prosecutions and fines. Safety training can be arranged in a couple of ways. One is through the Health and Safety Office. They have central safety training, or else you can organise training within your own unit. That's usually provided by an external provider for specialised tasks, or your own staff who have competency can provide training to other staff. The training organised through the Health and Safety Office includes risk assessment training, so anybody expected to assess should have risk assessment training. There's manual handling training, chemical safety, compressed gas, liquid nitrogen or cryogenic safety, first aid, fire safety, fieldwork first aid, and the use of GMOs. As we saw, it's important that training records are kept. So what should be in those records? There should be an outline of the training content, so that can be just in bullet points, the details of who provided the training, and the date, names and signatures of those that attended. So for example, a completed training attendance sheet. This information needs to be stored on the SharePoint so that's readily accessible. Training in isolation isn't going to solve all our health and safety issues. So as a manager, you need to think about how the training is to be put into practical use. So how is it applied back at the unit? So for example, after manual handling training, it's up to you to ensure that there is some follow-up. So if stores need to be tidied or loads need to be arranged to facilitate lifting, or correct manual handling equipment is bought. It's up to you as a manager to ensure that those elements are put in place and that the training is practically applied. So next on our list of things that managers and supervisors need to do is to make sure that there are emergency plans in place. So do you have a clear local fire evacuation plan and first aid procedures? In addition, your staff may need other location-specific emergency plans. So if there's a gas leak potential, if there's a chemical spill potential, specific emergency plans are required for those. So in order to determine whether you need a location-specific emergency plan, consider things like flammable chemicals being stored in the work area. If you have an emergency shower or an eye wash, how is that to be used in an emergency? Is there a potential for exposure to a particular chemical that requires specialist first aid? What is our plan for that? Have we got staff or contractors working in a confined space? We need an emergency plan to rescue those. What do we do if there's a gas leak? What would you do if there was a entrapment in a piece of equipment? So all of those require simple location-specific emergency plans. A good risk assessment will assist in identifying whether you need a location-specific emergency plan. It'll become evident that it is one of the control measures required to minimise or eliminate risk. The Health and Safety Office have a pilot lab-specific emergency planning toolkit. So that leads you through a series of questions as to what type of emergency plan you need, and it provides some editable infographics that you can post up in the lab or use for training purposes. Next on your list is equipment. So if your staff use potentially hazardous equipment, then you're going to need to determine what the inspection regime will be or what the testing requirements are. For example, portable appliance testing is required for electrical equipment that gets moved a lot or has multiple users. So if it's subject to deterioration, you need at a minimum visual inspection and in some cases portable appliance testing. If ladders are used, then inspection is required before use, or in some cases weekly documented inspections are needed. If you have compressors or lifting equipment or pressure vessels, there are statutory inspections. That is, very specific inspections carried out at a frequency set out in law. In all of these cases, you need to be keeping records. Number 5 on the list for managers is really important. It's about communication, supervision and communication. You must follow up and ensure that the controls you've identified in the risk assessment are actually being adhered to, that they are working, that they are useful. So you need to keep an eye on whether manual handling is being carried out safely or whether shortcuts are being taken, whether equipment inspections are actually taking place. So as a manager or a supervisor, you must have that overview and know that safety is being done correctly. And communication is a two-way street. You do need to listen to staff concerns around safety and to act when problems or improvements needed or highlighted. There's nothing worse than staff bringing to the attention of a manager or a supervisor some issue that they're concerned about and it falling on deaf ears. You will lose the room very quickly in relation to safety if you don't act and make improvements when issues are highlighted. A really good way of communicating the safety message is to ensure that regular documented inspections are carried out in the areas that your staff work in. You should be looking to carry out one of those inspections at least yourself. You can delegate generally for additional inspections, but be seen on the ground and get an understanding of what your staff are up against and the type of hazards that they encounter. And part of being a good health and safety leader is praising good safety behaviour, but also calling out poor safety behaviour. So let's move on now to a few case studies. So if you're a chief technical officer, what do you need to do? Well, of course, risk assessments are required. You'll need to ensure that risk assessments have been carried out for the preparation of undergrad practicals, for the handling of waste, for the use of hazardous equipment, and some task-specific manual handling risk assessments. For any of the labs that your staff are working in, there should be lab-specific emergency plans in place. You have to have a chemical inventory. Any hazardous equipment needs to have an inspection and testing regime in place with good records kept. Regular safety inspections need to be carried out. The training needs need to be identified and addressed, including manual handling, and all of the documents need to be uploaded to SharePoint. So moving on to the university librarian. So what does a librarian need to do? So like everybody else, risk assessments are at the heart of good safety management. So one would expect to see risk assessment for manual handling activities, so task-specific manual handling. Display screen equipment or workstation assessments need to be carried out for them. If they're driving for work, an assessment is required. And then a general risk assessment for the areas that they work in, covering housekeeping, electrical equipment, fire, etc. A librarian who's involved with event planning needs to liaise with buildings and estates, needs to produce an event management plan and to identify an event controller if necessary. The librarian should be carrying out regular safety inspections and carrying out a training needs analysis, identifying and addressing training needs of staff, including manual handling. And all of the documents need to be uploaded to SharePoint. So next up is the head of building services. So what is he expected to do? Same as everybody else, he has to carry out risk assessments. So he needs to make sure that risk assessments have been carried out for the use of hazardous equipment, any manual handling activities carried out by staff, the general office activities, as with the librarian, risk assessments for people using display screen equipment or PCs. If any of the staff are working in confined spaces, a very specific risk assessment is required for that. For work at height, again, specific risk assessments, and they may need to be done each time work is carried out at height. It's likely that he will need to carry out electrical risk assessments and also look at chemicals. So some of his staff may be using oil, for example. This guy has quite a bit to do. He needs to ensure that there are procedures in place for controlling contractors coming onto the campus. He's got to make sure that there are permits to work and that they're used by staff and contractors. He needs to ensure that regular safety inspections are carried out, and that any equipment used by staff is inspected and serviced, including those statutory examinations we mentioned earlier, like the lifting equipment or compressors. If we have confined space issues, specific emergency plans will be required. The training needs must be identified and addressed. So manual handling or work at height, safe pass, use of hazardous equipment, all of those need to be identified and staff trained. There should be induction training for contractors, and again, all of the documents need to be uploaded to SharePoint. Our next manager is head of office-based staff. So what does she need to do? Again, risk assessments. So she needs to make sure that risk assessments have been carried out for general office activity, that display screen equipment assessments have been carried out, and make sure that those working from home have also had an assessment. If there's any travel abroad, specific assessments are required. Driving for work may be in the mix, so a risk assessment for that required. And task-specific manual handling. So some of the staff could be lifting or moving archive boxes or exam scripts. Other requirements could be for staff who are lone working. So making sure that lone working arrangements have been agreed with staff who are working from home. If you've got staff travelling abroad, what are the emergency plans for them? Regular inspections need to be carried out of the areas that staff work in. And again, training needs need to be identified and addressed, manual handling being a particular issue. And all of the documents need to be uploaded to SharePoint. So once you've addressed those key issues, you do need to keep safety under review. So you need to review actions that arise from audits or inspections, making sure that they're completed, making sure that people follow through. Do contribute to your own unit's annual safety review or when the unit safety statement is being updated. Give some feedback on health and safety performance to your line manager and make sure lessons are learned from any accidents and near misses. You should be involved in accident and near miss investigation and follow through. Safety management, and in fact all good management processes, follow the plan, do, check, act model. So you need to plan what you're going to do, you need to do it, then check to see is it actually working, and then act to improve. So if something isn't working, what can we do to make it work? And the process goes around so that we have continuous improvement. So you're likely to need more information. There's a lot of information available in the university safety statement. There are live links that will bring you to all the relevant pieces of legislation. The Health and Safety Office website has additional resources that are easily searchable. And the Health and Safety Authority, so hsa.ie, have a series of publications as well. They're available to everybody. And so to conclude, leading on health and safety is rewarding and really helps build good relationships in a team. You do need to document what you're currently doing and also what you plan to do to ensure everyone's safety, and make sure you put that on SharePoint. Risk assessment came up again and again. It is the answer to most questions, but it's the action taken as a result of the risk assessment, not the document itself. Thank you.